starts. It is a season to clear out the old and bring in the new, a season to cast off the past and its mistakes and welcome new challenges. In this season of Lent, traditionally a season of fasting and sacrifice, we're reminded to help us to use them not just for ourselves, but always in the pursuit of benefiting others. Help us to make wise decisions within the budgets, so that everything we do will have the maximum impact for those in our city in greatest need. Take our gifts and...
Do we have any apologies for the meeting, please? No. Do any members have any personal, prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interest that may need to be declared at this meeting? Sorry.
Declare that I do personally use some of the health improvement services. Thank you.
The City Mayor will now present the Revenue Budget and Capital Programme for 2015-16.
Approve my budget for 2015-16, and I do so with a heavy heart and regret. This is the third budget that I've delivered as City Mayor for Salford. Salford is a city I'm immensely proud of. I believe that this budget represents a responsible and fair set of proposals, given the financial situation we are facing. Let me first outline the technical elements of the budget I am presenting for 2015-16. This will require acceptance by the Council of the Freeze Grant, and I have to tell the people of Salford that this is the 6th year running that Salford Council has frozen the council tax. I am also recommending a capital programme of 50 in accordance with the formal million in accordance with the legislation. A basic amount of council tax of £1,326.31 and an amount for each valuation band in accordance with the legislation. An amount of council tax for each valuation revenue account budget for 2015-16 of £15.847 million. Finally, from a technical point of view, I am recommending that the Council approve the Treasury Management Prudential Indicators for 2015-16 to I present this budget against a backdrop of severe and ongoing government austerity measures. Local government has been hit particularly hard, and the squeeze on local government finances is set to be exceeded. Salford's loss of government grant is worse. It's around 43% and potentially rising. Salford has been one of the hardest hit councils in the country. We are at the top end of the scale in this country in terms of the reduction of 1 million in 1 year. In the 5 years since this government has been elected, we have had to make savings of £149 million from our budget. Against this backdrop, I have taken seriously my legal and moral duty to set a balanced budget. The alternative, a budget set for us by government nationally, is simply not acceptable to the Salford people. At the heart of my decisions and the budget before you is an overriding priority, whenever possible, service. Every effort has been made to protect critical services, but it has to be admitted that some people in need will no longer receive the high level of service they have been used to in Salford. But I have said repeatedly, if this government did not take the money away from Salford people, we would not be making these cuts. Despite this comment, which I am sure all members should support, we must, as an organisation, face reality. I am under no illusion Significant organisational, transformational and reform will be necessary for us to continue to try to deliver the quality and type of services that our residents need and deserve. Our families and our services for children, young people, is central to my budget proposals. Those proposals focus on a reduction in children entering care in the first place, prevention, and by building the resilience of the services that support those who do need it as early as possible will continue. We will continue to develop strong and ever closer relationships with our partners in health, housing and in the community sector to ensure, wherever possible, that we continue to experience significant public health issues. This budget protects a number of vital services, including alcohol, drug, stopping smoking and cancer awareness. We will also continue to protect mandated services in health protection, sexual health and partners. I have used our best efforts to protect investment in key citywide services, such as street cleansing, the upkeep of our parks and green spaces, highways maintenance and regulatory services. These are crucial if we are to provide quality of life, absolutely critical. If we are to provide opportunities for our residents, it's the only sustainable answer to the challenges of ongoing government austerity. We are already seeing this. I am extremely proud of our council staff. The quality of services our residents receive is down to the hard work and commitment of our staff, who continue to impress me with their dedication to the people of our city. Since 2010, we have lost over 1,300 posts. We have done this through affordable decisions and voluntary measures. Unfortunately, the measures outlined in my report will mean we must lose additional posts in 2015-16. I am hopeful that these further reductions will again be achieved through voluntary means, and that we will once again not need to make any staff compulsory redundant. I am also proud that the proposals before the Council today do not include changes to any staff terms and conditions. Our staff deserve every penny and every condition they enjoy through their contracts for the hard work that they do. Salford is the first Greater Manchester authority to pay the full living wage, and we are the only council in the country to include in that living wage apprentices. I believe the response set out in my budget is a fair and reasonable one in these severely challenging times. It protects the principles we believe in, protecting the most vulnerable, supporting people to be independent, and continuing to invest in the growth of our remarkable city, even in these hard times. However hard the challenges we face, we must take seriously our responsibility to set a legal and balanced budget. Therefore, it is with a genuine heavy heart I am forced to recommend this budget to Council.
Okay, Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, I would like to echo the Mayor's comments. This has not been an easy process, and none of us would ideally like to be in a situation of having to look to reduce the budget. However, the reality of the economic situation is such that we have to look at tightening our belts. I have reviewed the Mayor's budget, and whilst I'm in agreement with some of the broader principles, and I agree with the principle of bringing in PricewaterhouseCoopers to perform a review, and I feel this was a prudent and sensible measure, I have nonetheless reviewed the Mayor's savings and made the following amendments. Firstly, I have removed the following savings, totalling 1.203 million in 15-16 and £294,000 in 16-17. These savings represent a removal of £120,000 from the 16-17 budget for transport for children with special needs, a removal of £50,000 from the saving proposed to local authority nursing provision, with reviews to the cost of paid places, a removal of £60,000 from 15-16 and £50,000 from 16-17 to the redesign of commissioning services into a single integrated team, a removal of £390,000 of savings from 15-16 from the environment, street cleaning and grounds maintenance and efficiencies savings, a removal of £50,000 from the winter savings budget from 15-16, and the removal of £80,000 from the 15-16 budget for the increase in bereavement services costs. This totals £360,000 in 15-16, £170,000 in 16-17. I have also amended the proposal CHSC 10/12, which is the redesign and prioritising of supporting people programme budget, the revision of savings to reduce by 2/3. So I have removed 2/3 of that budget. The total removed from savings, therefore, is £573,000 in 15-16, £124,000 in 16-17. As a corollary to that, I have made the following savings proposals for the same year. I have labelled these in the document which I circulated on Monday, which I know people have read because I've read the hatchet job in the MEN this morning. Savings C1, 3 days compulsory unpaid leave for employees over £21,000. This will realise an additional saving of £857,000 in the year 15-16. Savings C2, reduction of sickness entitlement by 50%. This will change the current offering from 6 months full paid and 6 months half paid to 3 months full paid and 3 months half paid. This will realise a saving of £282,000 in the year 15-16 and £201,000 in the year 16-17. C3, reduction of non-contractual overtime costs, around 10%. This is estimated to bring in £103,000 of additional savings in the year 15-16. The savings C4, the freeze of automatic pay increments for 3 years to begin in the year 16-17. This will realise a saving in 16-17 of £573,000. Savings C5, the voluntary reduction in allowances for the City Mayor and Deputy Mayor. This is estimated to be around £30,000 in the year 15-16. Savings C6, the reduction in the number of assistant mayors to 5, a saving of £88,000 in the year 15-16. A freeze on all councillor allowances to take place as of next financial year. For the year 16-17, this will save an additional £10,000. Savings C8, elected mayor's team lose 1 post from 4. This will realise a saving of £15,000 in the year 15-16. Trade union support, savings C9, a saving of £76,000 in the year 15-16 and £15,000 in the year 16-17. Environmental and community safety, removing funding from the Working Class Movement Library, a saving of £24,000 in the year 15-16. And from press and publicity, a saving of £109,000 in the year 15-16 by removing the functions related to press and publicity. With the additional savings that we've realised, we propose the following extra spending totalling £340,000 in the year 15-16. Additional discretionary highway funding at £30,000 per community area. This will total £240,000 in the year 15-16. And additional funds to extend free stay in the city car parks by an additional half hour, totalling 1 full hour now at £100,000. In making these amendments, we've looked at the savings we felt would most impact the most vulnerable in the city. It is not an easy process, and I would like to pay tribute to Neil Thornton and Nicky Bishop in particular for their exemplary help in helping me prepare this alternative. It's been very difficult to make sure that everything costs in, and I will not try to make a political point on the difficulty of having to reduce budgets, only to say that I think we have a duty here to look at whether we want to put money firstly into frontline services or back office functions. I am satisfied that my alternative budget presents the fairest and safest way of bringing the city towards the financial obligations it has to meet. I would commend this budget to the Council and hope that you will accept it.
Councillor Cheetham, are you going to second it? Yeah, well, are you going to... and you reserve your right? Right, thank you. Right, comments and amendment from the members. 5 minutes each. Councillor Ord.
I note again an attack on the Working Class Movement Library, with a proposal to remove the modest funding of £24,000. Particularly disappointing is these constant attacks come from a Tory group that have not visited the library and do not understand how important the collection is, covering many diverse topics of our history, from the Spanish Civil War to suffragettes. How can the electorate trust such a group to run the city when it doesn't even know the difference between a reference library and a lending library? However, there's no such thing as bad publicity, and would like to thank the Tories for the constant attacks which have helped improve knowledge of the library and increase patronage of this great facility. There's also a glaring omission. I presume this budget is because you want Labour to follow your policies. If that's the case, I see no increase in funding for planning. You've consistently been cheerleaders for your national party's planning reforms and consistently attacked this group for having to implement them. You've asked repeatedly for us to reject plans in your areas that comply with your party's rules and want money to be misused on constant public inquiries and the likely cost awards that would be made against the council. In that respect, this is a poorly thought out deficit budget. But what should we expect from the ultimate anti-politics party that promises everything but is unlikely to be in a position to fail to deliver them?
The total figures I've submitted release an additional £41,000 into reserves. It's not a deficit budget.
Councillor Balkine.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The City Mayor has already mentioned the fact that the staff in this council work extremely hard, and they become not just acquaintances, but a lot of them over the years have a friendly attitude to us all as we work extremely hard. You've got 3 days compulsory unpaid leave, which you put out every single year. I'm going to challenge the only person on the Conservative group that earns through council, him being a councillor, and that's Councillor Robin Garrido. That's about £25,000 that he earns. That's approximately £100 a day. I challenge you to make a donation to the Mayor's charity of £300, because that's what it is. That's what we're actually looking at. I challenge you, and I stand there. I give you the opportunity now to say, I'll give up my 3 days' earnings, like you want the staff to do. The staff are. It is a personal attack because it's. This
is the second year personal attack has been made on me. The figures cannot be justified. They are incorrect, and as such, will now be subject to legal action by myself.
You're welcome because of the truth, and you can't take it. The next is.
I'm sorry, I have just said that I will take legal action against you. That's not about taking it. It's a matter that you have made lies, incorrect assertions, and you will be held to account for that.
Fine. I look forward to defending myself. Next, sickness entitlement. Many of the staff in this council have had things like hip operations, suffered from cancer, suffered from stress, and we're looking at a situation where you want to, when people suffer, you actually want them to actually suffer financially. I think that's absolutely disgusting. As for the fact of freezing automatic pay increments, your Prime Minister has stood up and said the staff around the country have to be given more money. Why is it one for the private use and one for the public use? We're all in it together, as I think your Prime Minister has said. It's absolutely scandalous.
Councillor Antrobus.
Thank you, Chair. The number of members have been around a bit longer than I have, but this is my 36th budget meeting, and I have to say that in all of that time I have not experienced a more ineffectual, inept and insincere amendment from the Tories to the budget. Ineffectual because it doesn't change anything about the budget. It's the same council tax, the same level of spending, and, of course, because of the mayoral system that they championed, actually all their other protestations don't mean a thing. It's inept because, I'll just refer to some of the areas that I'm responsible for, they restore funding where there has been no cut in services. For example, they restore a saving in street cleansing. There has been no cut in the service of street cleansing. It's a genuine efficiency. How inept is it for politicians to come here and say that they will not accept genuine efficiencies? There's been no cut in service. And the same goes for winter maintenance. No cut in the level of service. Genuine efficiencies. So it shows how inept they are. They're putting money back where we've done the sensible and right thing. Secondly, when we look at where they want to spend more money, they want to increase the devolved budget by £30,000. The devolved highways budget. Now, this is the revenue budget. We do give community committees £10,000 a year revenue budget. The idea is to be flexible so that schemes in the locality which wouldn't go ahead under the normal investment programmes can go ahead. £10,000 a year that they're suggesting increases to £40,000 a year. But we think we've got the target just right, because most committees are not actually spending the £10,000. The Worsley and Boothstown Committee, for example, in the current year has only spent £621 of its £10,000 budget, but even though they can't spend what they've got, they're asking for £30,000 more. How astonishing is that? And it seems to me, there's no such thing as a point of information. I'm sorry. There's no such thing. And I'm working on figures that have been supplied to me just this morning, so it's the latest information by the Urban Vision. So it seems to me it's particularly inept in the way that they've done things, but the real thing that gets me is how insincere this is. They have, for example, targeted the easy things, the easy target, having a go at member allowances and the city mayor's allowances. Very easy. But who believes any Tory, when we've got a parade of Tory MPs appearing in the media at the moment saying £67,000 is not enough to live on? Can anyone believe a Tory who says things about the payments made to public servants? But it's insincere. It's insincere because its true purpose is to distract the media and the public from the biggest saving that they want to make. And the biggest saving that they want to make is to reduce the incomes of hard-working staff of this council and to penalise the sick. That's what they're about. Madam Mayor, the Tory party has been known over the years as the stupid party. It's been known as the nasty party. Today, they have shown that they are both stupid and nasty.
Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to reiterate and agree with what Councillor Ord just said about the Working Class Movement Library. It's one of the city's most amazing cultural assets. It's renowned both regionally, nationally and internationally. It's part of the enrichment and heritage and history of our city. It holds some amazing original copies, including most of the great works of Thomas Paine, who wrote The Rights of Man. I attended a creative arts conference yesterday in which it was reiterated by top people from around the country that the creative arts, culture and leisure is one of the biggest drivers of our economy at the moment and the biggest increasing sector in our economy, and it's something that I think we should wholeheartedly support. Thank you.
Councillor Merry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's not often I disagree with Councillor Antibus, but on this occasion I have to say I've heard more inept and ineffectual Tory budgets than this particular one. At least this particular one, and I understand it's your first time that you've actually delivered it, Councillor Clarkson, was very clear, very straightforward and almost devoid of any political content whatsoever. And I would have thought that this would have been an opportunity to at least follow the example of Councillor Cheetham, who in previous years has actually said how unfairly Salford has been treated in comparison to other local authorities by being singled out by central government for the cuts. Instead, I'm afraid, Councillor Clarkson just followed the straightforward Tory line of refusing to talk about their government, and no doubt there are very good reasons why he doesn't wish to talk about their government in relation to local affairs. I'm afraid that the absence of political content does not disguise the vindictive nature of this particular set of budget proposals. Reading it, and unfortunately I wasn't present in Salford at the time, I must admit I did splutter a bit over my cappuccino at the time, because I imagined Councillor Clarkson sitting there a bit like one of those Victorian mill owners, if you remember, sort of smoking the big fat cigar, saying to the workforce, "I'm awfully sorry, 3 days I haven't got any work for you, you're just going to have to go home. I don't actually care about whether you can put food on the table or not. I'm afraid you will not get paid for those 3 days, and thank you very much for all your hard work. And by the way, if you happen to be sick, or you happen to be suffering from sickness, I can only provide for a limited amount of time rather than the time I've provided for you in the past. I'm sorry, times are hard. I'm not going to suffer. You're going to take the brunt of this." And for what purpose? And this is what I find so vindictive. For what purpose does he want to cut the actual sick pay that people are getting? What purpose does he actually want to cut the number of days that they are allowed to work and to actually cut their wages? So that his friends can enjoy an extra half hour of free car parking and more potholes can be actually filled in the road, whereas, as has been pointed out by Councillor Andrews, we're well on the way to tackling those problems. Clearly, right, car parking and potholes are more important than people having a decent wage that do all the hard work in this particular organisation. I'm afraid I was appalled by that. I'm afraid I was appalled by the sheer spitefulness of the proposals coming out of the group opposite. And I don't think they're ineffective. I think they're done for a particular purpose. We have had these proposals recycled, and I'll congratulate them for that, year after year, as they target the working class movement library, they target our staff, and they target the people that are ill. They'll keep on doing that because they'll be bereft of any other ideas to provide the money to support those projects which are dear to their heart, as free car parking and doing something about the roads.
Councillor Dennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to just continue this theme of workforce reform. I mean, what's really interesting around some of the proposals that the Tories have presented today is what they haven't given us is any historical context to actually what our workforce has been going through over recent years. So let's just remind the Tories today that local government workers have experienced 4 consecutive years of pay freezes, below inflation rises in 2013 and 2014, which culminate in a pay reduction of nearly 20% since this coalition government came to power. This local authority has been through a pay and grading review, as you're only too aware of. 600 of our employees actually had a negative impact on their salary through that pay and grading review. Since 2010, 1,300 posts have been lost within this organisation. In this budget, another 500 posts, 300 of those to be cheaply transferred over to a new organisation. What does that actually mean to you? That is work intensification, because the demands on the streets, the demands in our community for public services is increasing, and our staff are continuing to deliver and go beyond what we ask them to do day in, day out. Also, you only are too aware of the fact that in local government, a disproportionate number of our staff are women. And what do we know about women within the labour market? Women are disproportionately affected by pay. Look at the Fawcett Society statistics. For every £1 a man earns, a woman earns 85 pence. So your proposals here will also disproportionately affect women in terms of freezing pay increments. Why? Because 70% approximately of our organisation is women. You know, these proposals are absolutely ridiculous. There's no context. You've just basically come up with proposals in the light of day, and you're not concerned about the historical context. You're not concerned about the impact on our staff. You sat there and you supported our Employment Standards Charter and the living wage, and here you are absolutely lambasting the staff within this organisation. It's an absolute disgrace, and you should all be ashamed of yourselves.
Councillor Ferguson.
Britain needs a pay rise. That was the campaign that was run by the TUC starting last October. And the argument behind that campaign was that if we're to get out of the economic crisis that we're in, we need to put more money into workers' pay packets, into their pockets, to encourage spending, so that we don't have a repeat of the last crisis brought about by borrowing. That was the reason that the TUC said Britain needs a pay rise. But the TUC isn't the only the organisation that's saying Britain needs a pay rise. A fortnight ago, the Prime Minister, speaking to the British Chamber of Commerce, said the same. Britain needs a pay rise today, and he gave it for a different reason. He said, economic success, this is his words, not mine, because I might question whether we've got economic success or not when I speak to the people in Salford, but he said, economic success can't just be shown in the GDP figures or on the balance sheets of British business, but in people's pay packets and bank accounts and lifestyles. So we've got the TUC and the Prime Minister saying that Britain needs a pay rise. And we get these proposals here now from the opposition, which appears to be saying exactly the opposite in relation to our staff. They're expected to take 3 days unpaid leave, which in my calculations are correct. That's a 0.8% pay cut, as well as the other things in relation to the sickness pay entitlement, the non-contractual overtime, and the freeze of annual increments. I think it says something about the opposition's attitude to our workers, and perhaps also some of their inept economics. I just remind you that yesterday was the 181st anniversary that 6 Dorset farm workers were arrested and deported to Australia, the Tolpuddle Martyrs. When I listen to the people across the chamber with their proposals to cut employees' salaries, to do away with their trade union representation and facilities for that, and the attack on the working class movement library, we can see that in Salford, the spirit of those employees 181 years ago is still alive and well.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I want to know why this Tory government has forced 3 days holiday. So let's call it forced days off or a wage cut. It's whatever you want to call it. For all council staff. I know we've already hit on this. People are already on a minimum wage. We're looking to get to the living wage. And as has been said already, we're already in austerity climate. What are you doing? Why is it happening? I'm reading a book at the moment, The Ragged Trousered Philanthropist. I think it's quite reflective of these times, and I'm learning quite a lot. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Karen Garrido. Right, it's Councillor Lindley.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard some very fruity language from some councillors opposite today. So all I would challenge them to do is to stand up and repeat those comments in public to members of their own party on neighbouring councils, Greater Manchester councils, who have put forward some of the proposals with which they have been so critical of us today. I'm looking forward to seeing the letters in the local papers, the Manchester Evening News, from Labour councillors in Salford criticising other Labour councils for some of the proposals that they've put forward as part of their budget process. They're happy to talk about what random Conservative members of Parliament can have been up to, so hopefully they will be more than willing to stand up to members of their own party who've put forward proposals that they feel are so bad and so wrong. We don't live in a vacuum. We know this has been a very difficult process. We know that the money is reduced from the government, but the simple truth is, and we know that Ed Balls is committed to a deficit reduction and elimination programme, the simple truth is that for all the hot air that we see locally, that not one single penny of that grant is going to come back, even if there's a Labour government. Not one single penny of that money is coming back to Salford if Ed Miliband walks into Downing Street. Not one single penny. But looking at our proposals, and Councillor Merry and others have focused on some issues. Personally, I'm delighted that we've been able to put forward extra parking, which will help local businesses, help local residents, that we've been able to put forward some money, some additional money, not as much as I would like, to help with local roads and highways, which is still a big issue for local people across the city. But for me, the most important proposal in ours is the fact that we're able to mitigate some of the cuts on the supported people budget, that we're able to put some money back in. And funnily enough, that wasn't something that was picked up by any of the councillors opposite. I would love to have been able to put even more back into that fund. If the members opposite had picked up on some of our proposals from last year, then actually we would now be in a position to put more money back into those areas. The money that we are able to put back in is going to make a massive difference to some of the most vulnerable people across the city of Salford. And for me, that's the most important piece of extra spending that we've got into this alternative budget. And it's no surprise to see that members opposite focused elsewhere. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Critchley.
Thank you, Chair. In a big city, in a great city like Salford, I think it's important we communicate with the public. We need to be telling people what's happening, what we're doing for them, the people we serve. We need to be telling people about the opportunities, about what's happening, what's available, and how we're working for them, giving facts and figures, responding to the press, being open and transparent. At the time of cuts, at the time when families are suffering, and the time when people need to know about what's available out there, we need to be doing more of this. We need to be enhancing that. And yet the Conservatives are proposing to scrap the press office completely. Under their plans, we won't communicate, we won't respond to any press inquiries, we won't be telling people what's happening. Press inquiries will go unanswered, we won't be providing quotes, we won't be providing those facts, we won't be getting the information out there. And if we did that, the Conservatives would be the first to stand up at this meeting and say, we're anti-democratic, we're not transparent, we're not giving the facts, we're not giving the information. What sort of city do you want to live in where we don't actually tell people what we're doing? What sort of council would we be if we're just ignoring the press completely? I say they'd be the ones, the first ones, attacking us. And I think this is a silly, ill-thought-out proposal. They'll only come back to bite them, and it's just not worth considering. I'm not even thinking about it, to be honest. Thank you.
Councillor Robin Garrido.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments to start with. Political parties very often get accused of concentrating on politics all the time. And we often hear the comments made about MPs shouting across the chamber at each other, whether it be on the budget or whether it be on other matters. And members of the public have expressed a desire to try and get away from that, to try and have sensible debates. I therefore find it really amazing, Madam Chair, that this morning all the party opposite can do is actually complain about the Conservatives for not playing politics. How hypocritical can you get when people like Councillor Merry and Councillor Antipas get up and complain that Councillor Clarkson gave a straightforward budget dealing specifically with figures and without trying to make any general political points, to purely
represents a straightforward.
That's not a point of information. I think that just demonstrates, Chair, the comments I've just made, and that is that all Councillor Anthony can do is try and make political points when what we should be doing is looking after the people of Salford. And I think, Madam Chair, that's exactly what our budget has sought to do. We don't have the wherewithal of the controlling group. We don't have a large executive to guide us, right? But we can actually look sensibly at the budget, which is what we've done, and we've looked at those areas where we think vulnerable people have been affected who shouldn't have been affected. And I'm just going to, make mention of one particular point. And I really want to refer in the amendment to where we seek to put back the proposed saving of £120,000 in 2016-17 in relation to SEN transport. We're talking about vulnerable people here, special educational needs. The savings referred to on page 97 of the Council report, where it says that there should be a reduced need for the Council to provide transport. And whilst we recognise that we should seek to encourage independence, I think, in fact, that we should accept that there is a percentage of people, that are not able to have that independence. They're not in a position to have that independence, however much we wish it for them. And that amounts to about 20% of these youngsters that we're talking about, which is in fact is about 40 in number. And they're not able to have that independence, basically because of their medical, physical or cognitive needs. And these are so severe that in fact it's difficult for parents to actually take these youngsters themselves to wherever it is they have to go. So I'll just refer briefly to the government policy of personal plans. And I think this is a point that was made by Councillor Jones in one of his questions. The personal plans, yes, are intended to give independence to adults with special educational needs. And I accept that that also includes 16 to 18-year-olds, because they are young adults. But as I've said previously, there is that small percentage, and the savings that we want to put back is to actually try and protect that very small number of people, but nevertheless a very important, vulnerable group of people that would benefit by that £120,000 being kept in. I think it is too risky, Madam Chair, to not take the personal circumstances of these youngsters into account. I think it's a very dangerous policy. I think it's a very dangerous policy by the Labour Council. Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't really think I need to respond to that. All I need to say, in fact, is that I don't think there's any contingency provision, and as such, we fear that the policy will inadvertently end up costing the Council more in the long run, and for these reasons, we are proposing the removal of the £120,000 saving, which in effect means that this money will be back and available to help these youngsters.
Councillor Stoll.
Thank you, Chair. Look, members have been on their feet making some important points all morning, so I won't waste time repeating what some of my colleagues have said. I think it's obvious that you've got my full support and I share your concerns and your feelings. But I can't sit here without just adding a couple of points. The world and his dog know about my views and my campaigning on car parking. However, even I would not try and slide an additional 30 minutes parking through and pass it off as frontline services. I certainly wouldn't advocate funding this by attacking our workforce who, let's face it, have been and are going through enough as it is already. And I certainly wouldn't want to fund it by any of the other measures put forward in this so-called alternative budget. And as for the Leader of the Opposition deciding to try and speak for Eccles councillors on car parking issues, as an Eccles councillor, I would ask her not to bother again, please, because I am more than capable of speaking for myself. I will give Councillor Clarkson this. We did at least get more notice this year than last year on this couple of page amended budget, receiving it Monday lunchtime rather than Tuesday night. However, I was astounded to see his replies to queries on the amendment by Councillor Jones via email, refusing to provide any answers. I did point out last year, and I feel the need to point out again this year, that the Cabinet have sat through hour upon hour upon hour of meetings, going through these proposals line by line in fine detail. All councillors have been able to approach assistant mayors at any time to discuss the proposals, to ask any questions and to discuss any suggestions that they may have. Not one opposition member approached me last year, and not one opposition member has approached me again this year. Again, a disappointing and disgusting attempt to try and score a few measly political points by picking out a couple of hot topic issues to try and buy popularity. But let's just remember the fact that the City Mayor opened with their government have taken over 40% of Salford's money from Salford's people. And I really hope our residents remember this and see through their amendments like the rest of us do. Thank you.
Councillor Hines.
Thank you, Chair. When I first saw Councillor Clarkson's amendment, quite frankly, I thought, why bother even talking about it? Give it short shrift. Why? Not because the actual contents of the amendment didn't need looking at, but quite frankly, it's a sham. A sham where the opposition are trying to get the high moral ground. That's what it's about. Not once has any member of the opposition in this debate this morning showed any contrition at all of the amounts of money that the government that they support has imposed upon this council and other councils in this country over the last 5 years. Not once. Not once. The Mayor made reference in his budget speech to the just under £150 million that this authority has had to take out, that has already decimated frontline services in this city. Never mind the opposition talking about wanting to put certain amounts back.
Crocodile tears.
Absolutely.
Crocodile tears.
It's disingenuous. They get up there on their feet talking about as though that we are the villain in the piece, when it's them and the government that they support that's the villain in the piece. time and time again, they come forward with these, as Councillor Connor has just said, crocodile tears. They couldn't give a monkey's about the majority of people in this city, the people that are struggling day in, day out. If they as members had to represent many of the people in the deprived areas of this city, they wouldn't last 10 minutes. It would frighten them to death, the areas that they would have to look at and contend with and take on behalf. We're all in it together, so their leader says. We're all in it together. Yet we see time and time again where the rich and powerful in this country get through at the expense of the most needy. That's where we are. 30 odd years ago, one of their ex-leaders, of course, said that she would want to put the country right. Of course, after she'd finished, the leader that followed her said this country's in such a mess, economically, that's what John Major said, I'm going to correct it. And she'd had 10 years, almost, 11 years. So when they talk about putting things right, they have not got a clue. Councillor Antrobus is right, inept. I could think of another word, but it's before the 9 o'clock position. The cuts that we've had to impose, as the Mayor has said, just under £150 million, and more to come. More to come. Because they've no time for local government. Never ever had time for local government. Margaret Thatcher attacked two elements when she took in local government and the trade union movement. They, because of their support for the government, are part and parcel of the attacking local government, and they're still wanting to have attack on the trade union movement. Over and over again. Whether it's money that's coming into the Labour Party, the most transparent money that comes into the party from ordinary members instead of big business. They want to see the trade unions made that big. It's totally disingenuous what they're saying today. Much of it came from last year. Again, they don't want to put it to scrutiny, as the Mayor has asked time and time again, like we have to do ours. Totally insincere, disingenuous, and as I say, members have talked about today, I would have given it short shrift. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Michael Wheeler, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will keep this short. I wasn't intending to stand and speak, because I think many of my colleagues were putting the case against this amendment very eloquently. However, I'll give the Leader of the Opposition this. She has got the Eccles councillors on their feet. This is a disgraceful amendment from the Tory group. As colleagues have said, it's full of ill-thought-out and ineffectual proposals with a thin veneer of populist propositions that they are determined to focus on to disguise who they are and what they're trying to do. One thing this council can rightly be proud of in these tough times is that as a major local employer, we introduced an employment charter standard and we've protected our staff to the best of our abilities. We all know the tough context that this budget is being set in, with millions upon millions being cut from this council's budget and ripped from the hands of Salford people by Tories sat in London. But while the tough choices have been made by the Labour group as a necessary part of this budget, this Tories group's blatant attack on the hard-working members of staff of this council is a disgrace and cannot go unanswered. The answer when setting tough budgets is not and will never be to become a rogue employer as they seem to want us to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jolly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I don't really know how much thought the Tories have put into this amendment, because it's pretty much the same amendment that we've had, as I think Councillor Merry said, for many, many years, and it's the same formula. What they do is find £1.5 million primarily by attacking the staff. I think 75% plus of what they're suggesting here is either staff pay, sickness, trade union rights, etc. Then, and we all know the position our staff are in. We've got fewer staff, they're working harder. We've all seen in our neighbourhoods how hard those staff have to work, and we rely on them for their goodwill and hard work to make this council operate. So the Tories' attitude to that is, give them a kick. Then when they've got that amount of money, they then look at the most sensitive and difficult, high-profile areas which we've had to address, and they put a bit of money back in. And then they pick a couple of things like the car parking, which they know will be popular. But here comes the cheeky bit. I could use stronger words, but the Tories seem to be a bit sensitive about fruity language this morning, although they have thrown words like hypocrite about. I'll just use the words barefaced cheek. They then stand up in this council and pose as the friend and protector of the vulnerable people of Salford. Now, how nauseating is that? And I don't think, they must think the people of Salford are pretty damn stupid, because the people of Salford know, and they'll give their verdict in elections in a few weeks' time, these things that are happening to us, these cuts that we're having to make, are the responsibility wholly of their government and their party. And unless they are prepared to condemn them, then the responsibility lies on them as well.
Councillor Collinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to speak for a moment about the local authority nurseries that are mentioned in the Safer Tracker CSD 27. These local authority nurseries are located in Barton Moss, Belvedere, Higher Broughton, Little Hulton and Winton, which are all areas of medium to high deprivation. The fees paid by parents whose children attend these nurseries are £35.50 for a full day and £167.50 for a week. In the private sector, nurseries such as the Stables in Swinton charge £40 a day, £200 a week, Holyrood £41.30 a day, £180 a week, and fledglings charge £47.50 per day and £210 per week. The local authority nurseries, in their details, state that they support parents returning to work or college. Obviously, we all want to see more people being able to work and getting good work-life balances. The parents who send their children to local authority nurseries probably do so because they can't afford any other form of childcare, and the proposed increase may not seem much, but if it is added up over a year, it is a substantial increase which would have to be paid by people who could ill afford it. It therefore does not make any sense to increase the fees in line with the nurseries in the private sector. Thank you.
Councillor Connor.
Is it working? Yeah. I'm not very good at this because I tend to want to talk to people's faces rather than to machines or electronic gadgetry. But can I just say that it's no different today's alternative budget than the Tories' philosophy since they've been since their inception about hitting working people, particularly the elderly, disabled, and now they're talking about hitting the very people in this council that provides services for older people, disabled people, and all those people that we are trying to help support in this dreadful time. So it's nothing new, this alternative budget. It's about them actually showing that they're the nasty party, they are the hypocritical party, and how they've got the cheek to even put up in elections, I don't know. And hopefully the people of Salford will make sure that none of them return that are up for election, the Tories I'm talking about, to this chamber. It's a disgrace, really, when you look at a lady that contacted me about the way that the benefits are being cut and pushed on to people who are vulnerable with mental health issues. And this lady had actually got to the point where she was thinking of doing self-harm, simply because of the sanctions placed upon ordinary people by this lot. Nasty party, nasty people, and what an example of that nastiness and nasty people we've got here today. Hitting working people, wanting to give them a cut of 3 days. What about Cameron, living in a social house? Is he taking any cuts? What about his house in Chequers? Are they taking any cuts? Are they heck? What they are, they're protecting the very rich at the expense of the very poor. This amendment should be voted down totally by everybody, including the sensible ones, if there is any, in the opposition.
Councillor Jones. Councillor Jeter, you've reserved the right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment does indeed follow on from previous recommendations in former years, and indeed a number of our proposals for expenditure savings in previous years have subsequently been adopted or are about to be adopted. Councillor Dennett refers to the historical context. Well, let's look at the historical context. Beginning in 2010, we said increase the target for Think Efficiency Phase 2 and other savings, including review management structures, rationalise office accommodation, share services with other councils, rationalise ICT functions, reduce the cost of neighbourhood management teams, reduce the management fees to SCL, reduce the management fees to Urban Vision, cancel loss-making events, reduce tourism, marketing and communications budgets. Those were all in 2010. In 2011, we added reduce the cost of directors and the senior management team. In 2012, we added reduce the Media City revenue budget, reduce the cost of member democratic services team. In 2013, we added renegotiate the BBC Philharmonic sponsorship payment plan. And in 2014, we added reduce the cost of senior leadership team, heads of service, middle management. All of the above have either been implemented or are in the process of being implemented. And if they had all been implemented earlier, the base budget would be less now, and as a result, the funding gap would be less now. Madam Chair, despite criticisms in this chamber on our role, we have participated in the budget-setting process every year, and we also made a number of suggestions for future years at a meeting with Councillor Mrs Garrido, the City Mayor and the Deputy City Mayor last February. We made a number of suggestions for future years. Turning to this amendment, it is an amendment to the revenue budget. It is not an alternative budget. Because we support the council tax freeze, we agreed with the decision to engage PwC last year to help us achieve savings, as they have done with over 100 other councils, and we support the principle of the inclusion of their suggestions in the Mayor's proposals, albeit a little short on detail at this stage. But there are certain proposals, as Councillor Clarkson has explained, that we do not agree with, and this is the reason for the amendment. Turning to the proposals for workforce reforms. As members opposite have correctly said, we first made these proposals as a group in 2011. At the time, I said they would be the most contentious, sensitive and difficult of our proposals to introduce. They still are. But in 2011, I also said that I understand that workforce reforms had been considered by the controlling Labour group in previous years, but not pursued. What we're saying is that we think they should be pursued, as other local authorities have done, both Conservative-controlled and Labour-controlled. Members say it's an attack on the workforce, but the lowest paid are protected from the 3 days unpaid leave. The living wage has been introduced, which we support, and at the end of the day, we are trying to put more money back into the Supporting People programme, street cleaning, grounds maintenance, highway maintenance, all of which we believe have suffered in recent years. And remember Pledge 7 from years ago, ensuring the cleanliness and maintenance of the city. We want to do that. 1 minute. Right, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Our proposals under the democratic heading are not new. They've been proposed previously. The reduction in the cost of council has also been raised in the budget consultation. In terms of the trade union support, this isn't about not holding meetings or cancelling the activity. It's about who pays. And on the press and publicity, the proposal is to merge the functions with a significant reduction in the level of advertising and press releases limited to essential information for communication to residents, like Councillor Critchley wants. I second this amendment to the revenue budget by the Conservative Group. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The City Mayor to respond to the amendment.
Now, just as I go on to speak on this amendment, Madam Chair, I think that it's really important that we collectively exercise our responsibility to the whole of the 250,000 people in this city and not to one person. I think it's really important that, as reasoned comments have been made by the Conservative opposition, I think it is so important that we do answer them in detail. That is our responsibility. So let me start with Councillor Cheetham, who I have personally a good deal of respect for in all senses. I have to say, when he talks about historical context, and he outlined all those different provisions.
Be quiet, or we'll have to move you out. Can you just sit down, please, and have respect when people are talking? You're interrupting me. Sit down while the City Mayor talks, please.
Right.
Sit down, or can you leave the chamber? Sit down while he's speaking. Sit down.
Right. Madam Chair, do you want me to carry on? Yes. Right, I will do so. Historical context, Councillor Cheetham says, he mentions think budget, and he rhymed off all those different measures that we as the Labour Council have put into place during these times of austerity. Well, let me tell you, it's a bit rich for the Conservatives to claim any kind of credit for actions the Labour Council was going to do in any case. But the difference between us, the difference between Labour and the Conservatives is this. Labour councillors in Salford do not want to implement any of these cuts at all, because it's the Tory government that is forcing the issue. And so the difference between Labour and Conservative locally is that we don't want to do it, but we are forced to, and we do it responsibly and sensitively. And the Tories want to do it for the sake of doing it, because they have no understanding of the needs and the feelings of the families that are absolutely under attack in this city. And I'll say this to those number of families who we have not been able to help. We have tried our best to maintain the best services for the most vulnerable. I've openly admitted at every turn that that means there are families with needs that no longer get services. I do regret that deeply. I wish it wasn't the case. But let those families remember, the only reason it's happening to them is because the Tories have taken away half the budget that we have in Salford for delivering these services. Their responsibility, not Labour's. It is absolutely staggering to me that the opposition spokesperson, I'm okay, Madam Chair, I'm okay. The opposition spokesperson made absolutely no mention of the capital programme. No mention of the capital. Oh, no, I wouldn't. I'd carry on. I'm okay. Madam Chair, let me say this. Individual voices are important. We will defend the right of individuals to say their piece in the appropriate way, at the appropriate time, in the appropriate manner. It is for us collectively to look to the interests of the whole of the people of this city, not to one individual who's got a big gob. I have to tell you that it is so important that I highlight the fact that the opposition has failed to respond to a major part of this budget proposal, the capital programme. I'm right. I know that I'm right when I say that the only way that this city has the possibility of mitigating against their councils, their government's measures of austerity. No, I'm not giving way. No government. This government must take the responsibility for the money that it's taken away from Salford people. And the only way we can mitigate against that is by growing our economy, having decent jobs with decent terms and conditions. That's what this Labour Council is all about, and we are highly successful at it. And what their government is doing with their ongoing austerity and worsening austerity measures is damaging our opportunity for growth. Right, thank you. Look, I have to tell you that there is just a couple of things I should say. Just to give one example of what it is that this Conservative government is doing to the people of Salford and how they are misleading the people of this city and this country. We now hear about job levels going up. What type of job levels? We in Salford are highly successful at getting decent jobs, but not enough. But let me tell you the con that this government exercises on people, because I'll refer to benefits later. In this city, we have 10,000, more than 10,000 people who have been sanctioned on benefits, who, because they couldn't turn up to a particular meeting or other such daft reasons, have lost their benefits, and supposedly for only a week, supposedly for a month. Some of them go on for months without it. I have to tell you, finally, Madam Speaker, Chairman, that's another place. Tories inept, insincere, vindictive, they're anti-worker, anti-trade union, and we know now that they're the party to close libraries. And it is doing that. They also are the party to destroy this great city's heritage. Scrooge would be embarrassed by this party. No party should be allowed anywhere near government at national or local level. It's a sham. They, the Conservative Party, are a sham. The people of this city will put that right at the local and national elections.
Record yes or no, so it would be a named vote.
Thank you, Chair. I'll call out the names. City Mayor?
Against the amendment.
Councillor Antrobus?
Against.
Councillor Belkind? Councillor Blower? Councillor Boschel? Councillor Brocklehurst? Councillor Birch? Councillor Eric Burgoyne? Councillor Valerie Burgoyne? Councillor Cheetham? Councillor Clarkson? Councillor Cohen? Councillor Collinson? Councillor Compton? Councillor Connor? Councillor Critchley? Councillor Dawson? Councillor Dennett? Councillor Durer? Councillor Dobbs?
Against.
Councillor Ferguson? Councillor Karen Garrido? Councillor Robin Garrido? Councillor Hamilton? Councillor Hesling? Councillor Hines? Councillor Hudson, Ceremonial Mayor? Councillor Humphreys? Councillor Hunt? Councillor Jolly? Councillor Jones? Councillor Keane? Councillor Kelly? Councillor King? Councillor Lancaster? Councillor Lee? Councillor Linley? Councillor McIntyre? Councillor Masheter? Councillor Merritt? Councillor Merry? Councillor Morris? Councillor John Mullen? Councillor Michelle Mullen? Councillor Murphy? Councillor Ord? Councillor Pennington? Councillor Pugh? Councillor Reynolds? Councillor Brendan Ryan? Councillor Patricia Ryan? Councillor Stone? Councillor Turner? Councillor Walsh? Councillor Warmisham? Councillor Warner? Councillor Michael Wheeler? Councillor Peter Wheeler? Councillor George Wilson? Councillor Paul Wilson? Councillor Ronnie Wilson? You got the numbers, Mike, yeah? Your member's lost.
Right, the amendment's lost. Comments on substantive motion to the City Mayor from members, 5 minutes each.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to make a couple of comments to the City Mayor about the overall budget situation, because I suppose I'm really worried, if you like, about local government in general and where local authorities are going to be in the next year or two. What I've been looking at is the National Audit Office financial sustainability of local authorities. It was only published a few months ago. And, for example, it is a complicated report, and I tried to read it a couple of times so I could understand what they were saying. But I think the gist of it is this, that when we talk about cuts and a level of cuts, that hides what's going on below the surface. In other words, there's a lot more going on within local authorities than can be, the statistics, if you like, don't tell the truth, really. For example, in 1 year alone, 200 branch libraries closed in England. Now, I can't believe the Tories are proud of that. You can't be proud of that, can you? 200 in 1 year. In 1 year. Now, the second thing is, the Conservatives and ourselves talk about protecting frontline services, and the City Mayor has said that that's what we're trying to do. But in the first 2 years of the Conservative government, the frontline services, especially adult social care, were only cut, when I say only, it's still a big cut, by 15%, because everybody was trying to protect them. But in the second 2 years, it was cut by 40%. So you can see that local authorities are running out of options. And then when you get down to the individual services, because we're trying to protect children, we're trying to safeguard children, we're trying to educate children, we're trying to protect elderly people and so on, we end up with cuts of nearly 50% on community safety, 40-odd% on traffic management, 46% on planning and development, 34% on housing, 29% on culture. So the point is, this isn't from party politics. This is the Audit Office telling us what's happening. And our audit
have said to us in Salford that in 2 years' time, this council will have lost 50% of its budget. So the question to the City Mayor, really, when he winds up this debate, is we've got this huge devolution going on now with the health service, which is generally good news, £6 billion. We've got a combined authority, which generally we support and we want to see. But what is the future of the district authorities and local government in England? What's our future when 50% of the budget will have gone? And if these cuts continue, how on earth are we going to protect frontline services? Because that's the key issue. How on earth can we do it when the statistics are showing us year on year they're being cut?
Councillor Ferguson.
I'd just like to make a point, and I think a number of comments have been made today which have been somewhat disingenuous. It's been implied that the cuts from government would have been no different if we'd had a Labour government or a Conservative government. I want to quote from the document that we're going to vote on today, the report. And in the first paragraph, it quotes from the Public Accounts Committee that talks about local government facing in real terms government funding reductions ranging between 5% and 40%. Some councils have had cuts of 5% and others have had 40% cuts. And it then goes on to say, it is a fact that these cuts hit harder in the most deprived areas of the country, and the reduction in real terms funding for the council is in the region of 41%, of which shows that we're at the very top of the estimate. In actual fact, it shows that we're over the top of the estimate that the Public Accounts Committee is saying. And so, when people say in this chamber, or have been tweeting this morning, that it makes no difference if we have a Labour government, actually saying that the City Mayor hasn't said what Ed Balls is going to say if he's appointed as the Chancellor of the Exchequer in May, that's what's going to happen to this council, which is, I think, is a bit ingenuous. But the point I say is, Councillor Karen Garrido, we've made these points on a number of occasions about the unfair allocation of the cuts, and Councillor Karen Garrido has told us that she's been down, speaking to David Cameron, speaking to George Osborne, speaking to Eric Pickles, speaking on behalf of Salford. She's never actually shared with us what the results of those conversations have been and why it is that despite the points that she's presumably been making to them, they've taken no notice of them. And perhaps the City Mayor might like to comment. And perhaps you've been having discussions with the City Mayor that we're not aware of. But I think, you know, it's one of the points that needs to be made. Why are the Tories treating Salford so unfairly in comparison with the other councils?
I'm not Councillor Hines to second the budget motion. The budget, Councillor Hines. Oh, Councillor Garrido then.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Oh, wow. When you were elected over 3 years ago, you made the point that you said we have to learn from the mistakes that we've made in the past. I can't see, Mr. Mayor, that you've learnt anything from the mistakes that were made by the previous regime. But there are a few things that you have done which we would agree with. You have brought in PricewaterhouseCoopers to do a review, which as we've stated, are very welcome. But we're disappointed that there is a lack of detail regarding this in the budget. It just keeps saying, we're reviewing it, we're reviewing this, we're reviewing that. We welcome the council tax freeze, which the government has funded for another year. It's very welcome for our hard-working residents. I want now to speak on the capital spending, and a lot of people in this room will know how, in particular, I am very concerned about the unsupported borrowing. Can I say from the outset that we support the capital expenditure with this one reservation? Within the report, it states that in the 3 years up until 2014, we borrowed £100 million. That's unsupported. And we intend to add to that this year of up to 20 million. We have to remind ourselves that this has to be serviced, that means the interest has to be paid, out of the revenue account. When you look at this, the list there is very little of other money coming in. I think we should have a serious conversation, and this is a very personal thing, with regards to, and I don't know whether it can happen, some of using some of the Section 106 money in this area. I'm not sure whether it could help, but I think we should have that conversation, and I'm sure that hopefully will happen. If you look on page 59, you will see the protocol was passed by this council in 2004, and it's still in place. It's not altered, it's not been changed. It is very clear in the way that unsupported borrowing can be used. And on page 66, it gives the key risk to unsupported borrowing, and at 3.7.1 it says, and I quote, "Unsupported borrowing will be overcommitted and become unaffordable to the revenue budget." As I say, I am very concerned about this unsupported borrowing within this capital expenditure. And I have to say, as Margaret Thatcher once said, and I quote, "The problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money, and you're about to do that." Can I finally say that on voting on the recommendations, we would be opposing recommendation 1, but if there'd been a separate vote on the recommendations, we would have voted on recommendations 2, 3 and 4 and 5 in favour. And with regards to 5, it's no longer a Finance and Budget Scrutiny Committee. It is now the Overview and Scrutiny, plus 6 and 7. But because it will be taken en bloc, we will be voting against them all. Thank you.
Councillor Hines.
Thank you, Chair. In supporting the Mayor's budget, unlike the Mayor, it's not a budget that I would want to be presented today. Quite clearly, the cuts are horrendous, and they have been for 5 years. And I can remember when it was in my life as lead member for Finance 5 years ago, getting up in this chamber. And remember at that time, the first thing that the coalition government did was take away our area-based grant. Do you remember that? Yeah. Which was crucial for many areas in this city. An easy thing to do and often forgotten. And then, of course, when Osborne came out with his statement, and based over 4 years, it was a 28% cut. Well, we've now seen that that's 40% cut. And Councillor Ferguson has quite clearly said as well the unfairness of that. So it's not something that we all want to be doing. But we're doing it because we have no choice. Or the alternative, which some would recommend, an illegal budget, would be making it even worse. That is the point. If you've seen the Conservatives' amendment today, well, just imagine if it was commissioners in power and the cuts that they would be imposing on the people of this city. That puts it in perspective. But, yes, Councillor Ferguson made the point about that if a Labour government had been in power, these cuts would have been made. Well, if you can remember, in 2010, the Conservative government said it would erase the deficit in a parliament. Has it done that? No, it hasn't done that. It's going worse. The debt is going worse, and that's the problem, because that is what you've got to finance. It's gone worse. It's gone worse, and will do. The Labour Party said it would halve the deficit over a parliament in a controlled way, and there would be room for growth, which would have meant that this council and other councils and other public services would not have been having to make the cuts. And we perhaps would have had a Labour Chancellor that comes in would have not been faced with the problem that he's got. Councillor Garrido then has just mentioned Margaret Thatcher when she said the trouble with socialism, it runs out of people's monies. Well, I didn't know the bankers were socialists. You know, because they certainly ran out of people's monies, didn't they? To some tune, they run out with it. That's what they did. And Councillor Garrido then makes comments on the capital programme. I've said time and time again, I apologise to nobody for the capital programme that we've run in this city. It served this city and its people well. Not just now, not just in the past, but it will do in the future. And the revenue that we get that supports the revenue budget because of that expenditure, that capital expenditure, is first class. And yes, we have got to be vigilant with unsupported borrowing. We have. We're not stupid. If interest rates were suddenly to rise, we have a problem, or could have a problem. That's why we've been looking and cutting our unsupported borrowing, cutting our spending. But look, why do we have unsupported borrowing? Because the government won't support us. If they were to support our borrowing across the board, like governments did many, many years ago, maybe we wouldn't have to borrow it ourselves and meet the costs ourselves. That's the position that we're in today, and if we hadn't got unsupported borrowing, that would be a major problem for this city. So I'm not going to be apologising. We are where we are. We're doing a first-class job in that regard. We're helping not only public expenditure, we're also, with our capital spend, assisting your friends in the private sector so much. That's what we're doing. We want to do it. It's necessary. It's good for the city, and long may we continue. Yeah.
Thanks. City Mayor, right to reply on substantive motion.
I'm going to have to talk really fast. Look, in reverse order, Councillor Garrido says I made a statement that I would learn from mistakes, that we needed to. I did. I've learned that the Tories don't understand how this council works and how to make it protect the most vulnerable in this city. Councillor Ferguson, whether there's any difference between Labour and Tories for the future in terms of grant and so on. The Labour Party is committed to reviewing the grant system and making it fairer. If it's made fairer for those that it's unfair to, Salford must benefit. Salford can only benefit under Labour. Councillor Jones, the biggest question of them all, the future of local government. Who am I to say? But I'll tell you what my guts tell me. If this Conservative Lib Dem government was returned, God forbid, for another term, I predict that we will see councils in this country go bankrupt in our lifetime. I cannot put it more seriously than that. That is not scaremongering. That is a real potential under Conservatives and Lib Dems. Now, can I say again, I will not resile from repeating this. If this Conservative Lib Dem government did not take the £149 million to date away from us, we would not be making these cuts today. We would be doing what we are good at. Salford Labour Council and its workers have set up some of the best quality local government services in this country. The Labour Party wants to get back to what we do best, developing and delivering top quality services for those in need and those that we serve. To do that, we have to convince the people of Salford it's not in their interests for the Conservative Lib Dem government austerity measures to be implemented so fast and so deep. And we need to convince them that their interests are best served by a Labour administration, both locally and nationally. Now, put this in a historical context. We've got to see ourselves in the world. We are seeking as a city and as a city region to be a global player. So let's just review where we've come from. After its initial show of unity in 2008-9, the G20 group of nations split between the minority that had favoured a continuation of the stimulatory economic policies which had helped us to avoid slipping into a global depression. Not a recession, a global depression. And a majority, including the UK Conservative Lib Dem government, who favoured to support an immediate deficit reduction and the resultant extreme austerity measures. Our UK Conservative Lib Dem government has aggressively and, in my view, recklessly pursued an austerity strategy that is detrimental to the city of Salford and its people. Since the last general election in 2010, this Conservative Lib Dem government austerity measures, and I will keep repeating who the government are, Conservatives and Lib Dems. Their austerity measures means that they have reduced the amount of grant given back to Salford by £149 million. That's 43% of all money we have to spend on the services the Council provides for residents. Nationally, I believe we need to put together a practical set of ideas to stimulate jobs, protect the environment, tackle housing shortage, address the looming problem with pensions, control the banks and rebalance the economy away from finance. Only a Labour government would guarantee such a programme of economic stimulation such as this. A Labour government which would deal with the deficit and the national debt in a much more reasoned, controlled and sustainable manner. Labour has promised a review of the government grant system, which would be fairer to councils in need like Salford. Salford is reported to have the fastest growing house prices in the country outside London, and we are also developing quality affordable housing for both sale and rent with our housing partners. Salford is predicted to have between 7 and 8% economic growth between now and 2025. These are levels of growth normally experienced only by the great developing economies in the world like China, Africa and Brazil. This success in Salford sits cheek by jowl with some of the most deprived areas in the country. And this Salford success is definitely jeopardised by the continuing government austerity measures which are cutting too fast, too hard and too deep. I have to tell the people of Salford that I am genuinely concerned that this government's irresponsible drive to impose counterproductive austerity measures, whilst at the same time planning to deliver £7 billion of tax cuts for the richest people in our society, is an outrageous attack on the people of Salford's interests and indeed the people of Great Britain. So what is the action that Salford Labour Council has taken over recent years to mitigate against the worst effects of these government austerity measures? Salford has invested heavily in the quality of our schools, having rebuilt or refurbished every secondary school in the city and with significant investment in the primary schools. And we will continue with our partnership programme so that the workforce is equipped with the skill sets to access. Now, Madam Speaker, I conclude. Our residents have faced government changes, the introduction of the despised bedroom tax, the move to universal credit, the reduction in council tax support, and the insensitive and heartless government removal of £1.4 million funding from the Salford Distress Fund for the most vulnerable. I can tell you today that we can announce that this Labour Council will continue to take action to mitigate against the worst effects. We've campaigned against the government and we've had some small success. We have got the government to agree to give Salford £500,000 back for the Distress Fund. We can announce that we will have our own Salford Distress Fund, and it will be that money plus any work we can do with our partners to get the best quality distress fund for the people of this city. Finally, I have to say, Madam Speaker, if the positive predictions for Salford I've outlined are only half right, it would still be amazing. I have to say this, finally. As Mayor, I will continue to show strong leadership in the interests of the people of Salford and their families for the future. But it is the people of Salford who will choose and create that future. The Labour Council's mission has been to do the best we can for the people of Salford, even in dire financial circumstances. I believe we have carried this mission out to the best of our ability. It's only with the confidence and support of the people of Salford at the forthcoming local and general elections that we can continue on this mission. In the meantime, I reluctantly put this budget proposal to the Council for endorsement and give a guarantee that as soon as it's passed, we will take every action every day to mitigate against those proposals that were forced to pass today.
Right, we have the vote on the substantive motion, and it'll be a named vote.
City Mayor. In favour. Councillor Antrobus. Councillor Bolkind. Councillor Blower. Councillor Boschel. Councillor Brocklehurst. Councillor Birch. Councillor Eric Burgoyne. Councillor Valerie Burgoyne. Councillor Cheetham. Councillor Clarkson. Councillor Cohen. Councillor Collinson. Councillor Compton. Councillor Connor. Councillor Critchley. Recorded. Councillor Critchley. Councillor Dawson. Councillor Dennett. Councillor Durer. Councillor Dobbs. Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Karen Garrido. Councillor Robin Garrido. Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Hesling. Councillor Hines. Councillor Hudson. Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Hunt. Councillor Jolly. Councillor Jones. Councillor Keane. Councillor Kelly. Councillor King. Councillor Lancaster. Councillor Lee. Councillor Lindley. Councillor McIntyre. Councillor Masheter. Councillor Merritt. Councillor Merry. Councillor Morris. Councillor John Mullen. Councillor Michelle Mullen. Councillor Murphy. Councillor Ord. Councillor Pennington. Councillor Pugh. Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Brendan Ryan. Councillor Patricia Ryan. Councillor Stone. Councillor Turner. Councillor Walsh. Councillor Warmisham. Councillor Warner. Councillor Michael Wheeler. Councillor Peter Wheeler. Councillor George Wilson. Councillor Paul Wilson. Councillor Ronnie Wilson. Yeah, item 4 now. And that's the budget. Yeah, the motion's carried, and then let's move on to item 4. Oh, sorry, that's me.
Right, the motion's carried. We'll move on to item 4. Treasury Management Strategy, Annual Investment Strategy and Minimum Revenue Provision Policy Statement. So is that Councillor Hines?
Thank you, Chair. I move it, and just to move it, I'd just like to point out to members on page 1, Madam Mayor, 1.1, the background, what we're about, to make sure that we have an adequate cash flow. I think that needs to be shown, that we have a low risk. That's what we're trying to do. Point 1.2, the prudential and treasury indicators and treasury strategy. You can see what their points are there. Capital plans including prudential indicators, the minimum reserve provision, treasury management strategy including treasury indicators and investment strategy. And over the page on 1.3, the treasury management, where we're looking at capital issues and all those issues under treasury management issues. Any questions, I'll do my best to answer them, Chair.
Somebody's got to second it. Yeah.
Seconder.
8 to win off my balls.
Oh, sorry.
So that's, any comments now? You've put the seconder down, have you? Right, any comments?
For against the recommendations.
Pardon?
What was for against the recommendations in the report?
Right, the votes for it. I've got to
Against the recommendations only.
vote for the recommendations. Right. Any against? Any abstentions? No, that's it. Is that it? We're concluded. Right, that's the end of council. May I now declare the meeting closed and thank you all for your attendance.